she decided to cut down an old tree in the yard, thinking she was simply getting rid of the shadow of the past. But inside the trunk, a secret about her late husband awaited her, the very secret that had cost him his life. Subscribe and write in the comments which city you are watching from. The morning was cool and gray, the kind that carried the smell of damp earth and made every sound seem sharper, more intrusive. Anna Morris rose from her bed, not with the vigor of someone about to face a new day, but with the weary determination of one who had grown used to carrying burdens she could not set down. Her house creaked around her, as though it too had grown tired of standing. The faded wallpaper in the hallway peeled near the corners, and the wooden steps sagged beneath her weight when she walked down to the kitchen. Every detail of the place spoke of years of use and neglect, the slow decline that had set in after her husband's death. Her husband, Michael, had been gone for 6 years now. The official story was that he had died in a car accident on a highway outside the city. Newspapers had written about it briefly, some with a tone of mockery, others with the detachment of professional reporting. But behind the neat headlines lay another truth, one she had always sensed, but never been able to prove. Michael had been a journalist, one of the few who still believed in chasing dangerous truths. In the months before his death, he had been working on something larger than any story he had ever attempted. He had spoken in vague terms about corruption, about men in high places who thought they were untouchable. And then, suddenly, the accusations against him appeared in the press, claiming he fabricated evidence, that he lied to make himself look important. A week later, he was dead. The weight of that loss had never left Anna. Worse than grief was the shame that clung to her afterward, when neighbors whispered and strangers looked at her with suspicion. She had raised her children in the shadow of that judgment. Her son Daniel, who was 15 now, carried a bitterness that hardened him early. He seldom spoke of his father, and when he did, it was with a quiet anger, as though Michael had betrayed them by dying. Her daughter Lily, younger and gentler, had clung stubbornly to her memories of her father. She asked questions Anna could never answer, questions about who he truly was and why he had been taken from them. On mornings like this, Anna felt the silence of the house pressing down on her. She looked through the kitchen window into the yard, where the old poplar tree stood tall and imposing, its thick trunk scarred with age, its branches spreading like a canopy of shadows across the lawn. Michael had loved that tree. He used to sit under it with his notebooks, scribbling until the light faded. He said the tree was a witness to everything, that it gave him comfort to write beneath something so old and enduring. For Anna, however, the tree had long since become a symbol of heaviness, of something that refused to let go of the past. Its roots pushed up the ground near the foundation. Its shade kept half the house in gloom, even in the brightest months, and whenever she looked at it, she felt an invisible chain tying her to memories she no longer wanted to carry. She had thought about cutting it down many times. Each time, Daniel protested, sometimes with anger, sometimes with quiet resentment. To him, the tree was the last living piece of his father, and removing it would be an act of betrayal. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to share her mother's unease. She whispered once that the tree frightened her, that its branches looked like fingers reaching for the house at night. Anna had smiled at the time, trying not to show how deeply she agreed. That morning, as she stared at the poplar from the kitchen window, a decision crystallized in her. She could not go on living in this limbo, trapped between grief and fear. The tree was more than wood and leaves. It was the weight of years of silence, of unanswered questions. She knew it had to fall. She did not tell the children at once, but later, when Daniel returned from school, she mentioned it quietly over dinner. He reacted as she expected, slamming his fork onto the plate and muttering, "You're just trying to erase him." His face tightened with a hardness that reminded her too much of Michael in his moments of defiance. "It's all we have left." Lily, sitting across from him, shook her head. "It's just a tree, Daniel. It doesn't bring him back. It just makes Mom sad." Anna said nothing, only looked between them. She knew that in making this decision, she would fracture them even more, but she could not turn back. That night, she lay awake, listening to the wind rattle the branches against the window, and promised herself that by tomorrow, she would begin. The next day dawned brighter, as though the sky itself were granting her permission. She found the old axe in the shed, its handle worn smooth by years of use. She tested its weight in her hands and felt the ache of muscles that had not worked so hard in years. Daniel stood in the doorway, his arms folded, his expression closed. He did not speak, but his silence carried the same accusation as his words the night before. Lily hovered nearby, uncertain, but quietly supportive. Anna tightened her grip on the axe and stepped toward the tree. The first swing was clumsy, glancing off the thick bark and jarring her arms. She clenched her teeth and swung again, harder this time, hearing the satisfying crack as the blade bit into the wood. She continued, each strike ringing through her bones, each one carrying with it the frustration of years. Sweat gathered on her brow, her breath came hard, but she pressed on. With every impact, she felt something inside her shifting, as if she were cutting away not just wood, but also the paralysis of grief. Hours seemed to pass in moments, and the cut in the trunk grew deeper, a dark wound spreading across its surface. She paused to wipe her forehead, leaning on the axe for support. That was when she noticed it, a dull metallic sound, different from the hollow thud of wood. She frowned, swung again, and the same clang echoed faintly from inside. Her breath caught. Curiosity overtook exhaustion. She widened the cut, chipping away at the bark until the glint of plastic appeared, dirt-streaked but unmistakable. She dropped the axe and reached in with trembling fingers. Buried deep within the trunk, sealed by resin and bark, was a small, plastic-wrapped bundle. She pulled it free, heart pounding as though she had uncovered a living heart instead of a hidden object. Her hand shook as she tore open the brittle plastic. Inside was a flash drive, black and unremarkable, yet heavy with the weight of significance. Alongside it was a small velvet pouch. She opened it and gasped. Inside were several stones, rough but luminous, catching the sunlight in fragments of red, blue, and green. They looked like gems, not polished or set, but valuable all the same. For a moment, Anna stood frozen, the bundle in her hands, the tree looming behind her like a silent sentinel. Her mind reeled. Michael had hidden this. He had chosen the one place she would never think to look, the one place tied to him and the house. Why? What had he meant for her to find? She felt Daniel's eyes on her and heard Lily's soft intake of breath. The world seemed to hold still, the air thick with the weight of revelation. She clutched the flash drive and the pouch to her chest, and in that instant, she knew that the past she had tried so hard to bury was about to rise again, and that her life and the lives of her children would never be the same. For a long while after she pulled the bundle from the hollowed trunk, Anna stood staring at it, unable to move, unable even to breathe evenly. The air in the yard seemed heavier, as though the very act of opening that old tree had disturbed not only the wood, but the silence that had shrouded her life for years. Daniel was watching her with suspicion. His arms still folded, as if protecting himself from what she might say. Lily had crept closer, her wide eyes fixed on the small pouch and the black flash drive that gleamed dully in her mother's hand. The children did not speak, and Anna could not yet find the words. She pressed the items against her chest, feeling their weight, which was far greater than the sum of their materials. They were relics of a truth buried with her husband, and now, by some unspoken design, entrusted to her. That night, after the children had gone to bed, Anna sat at the kitchen table with the laptop open in front of her. The device was old and slow, but it still functioned well enough for her to insert the flash drive into its port. She hesitated for a long moment before doing so, her hand hovering in the air. She thought of Michael, of his voice late at night when he whispered about his investigations, of the tension in his eyes when he tried to keep her from worrying. She remembered the way he had kissed her forehead the morning he left for his final trip, the one from which he never returned. With a trembling breath, she pushed the drive into place. The computer screen blinked, and a folder appeared. There were dozens of files, photographs, scanned documents, fragments of typed notes, and audio recordings. She clicked one at random, her heart in her throat. Michael's voice filled the kitchen, faint and uneven, but unmistakable. "If you're hearing this," he said, "then something has happened. I'm closer to the truth than I thought, and it's bigger than I imagined. They're using the stones, trading them through shadow networks, hiding the money where no one will look. If this gets out, it could bring them down. But if it stays hidden..." His voice trailed off into a sigh. Then, "Anna, if it's you who finds this, forgive me for leaving it to you. I couldn't risk keeping it anywhere else. The tree was the only place I trusted." Her breath caught at the sound of his words. It was as though he sat beside her again, whispering his confessions in the quiet hours when the children slept. Tears burned her eyes as she clicked through more files. Photographs of rough, uncut gems, like the ones in the pouch. Lists of names and dates. Coded emails that hinted at transactions involving politicians and businessmen. Some of the documents bore the stamps of companies she had seen advertised on billboards in the city. Names she had always associated with respectability. Now they looked sinister, bound by invisible threads to the pouch of stones that rested on the table beside her. The kitchen door creaked. Daniel stood in the doorway, his face half hidden in shadow. He had not gone to bed after all. He looked from the screen to the pouch and back again, his jaw tight. "You shouldn't be doing this," he muttered. "This is why he died. If you start digging, they'll come after us too." Anna swallowed hard, closing the laptop. "Daniel, your father wasn't a liar. He was telling the truth, and they killed him because of it." He shook his head with bitter force. "It doesn't matter. He's gone. Knowing the truth won't bring him back. It'll just ruin us all over again." Lily's voice piped up from the stairs, softer, almost pleading. "But it matters, Daniel. Don't you want to know why? Don't you want people to see that Dad was good, that he wasn't what they said?" The boy's eyes flashed, torn between anger and grief. "What's the point? We'll just end up like him, dead or hated." He turned and went upstairs, his steps heavy. Anna sat motionless, listening to the sound of her children's conflict echoing inside her own heart. She was torn in two, the instinct to protect them pulling her one way, the yearning for truth and justice pulling her the other. She looked at the flash drive again, at the black rectangle that seemed so small and yet contained so much danger. She knew what Daniel meant. If she pursued this, she could be putting them all in jeopardy. But if she let it lie, she would be living in a cage built of lies, the same cage that had suffocated her for 6 long years. The following days blurred into a haze of secrecy. She waited until the children were asleep or out of the house, then opened the files and studied them. There were drafts of articles Michael had never published, with notes in the margins about sources he feared had been compromised. There were transcripts of phone calls, names of officials she recognized from the news. The more she read, the clearer it became. Her husband had uncovered a network of corruption that stretched far beyond anything she had imagined. The stones in the pouch were part of the evidence, untraceable gems smuggled from conflict zones and laundered through legitimate businesses. The men behind it were wealthy, powerful, and ruthless. One night she found a note buried in a folder. It was just a few lines, hastily typed, but it struck her like a blade to the chest. If something happens, Anna, look to the tree. It will keep the truth safe until you are ready. Her hands trembled as she read it again and again. He had known. He had prepared for this moment, trusting that one day she would find the courage to face it. But with the files came shadows. Strange things began to happen. One evening, when she returned from the grocery store, she found the gate standing open, though she knew she had closed it. Another night, her phone buzzed with a message that contained no words, only a blank screen. Twice, she noticed a car idling at the end of the street, its headlights off, its occupants hidden. She told herself it was coincidence, but deep down she knew it was not. The act of opening those files had awakened something, stirred a nest of wasps that had lain dormant but not dead. She tried to hide her unease from the children, but Lily noticed. "Mom," she whispered one night, "why do you keep looking out the window? Is someone out there?" Anna forced a smile and shook her head, but the fear in her chest only grew heavier. Daniel avoided her eyes, as if he already knew and hated her for it. The final proof came one evening when she sat again at the table, the flash drive in the computer. She heard the low hum of an engine outside, too close, too deliberate. She went to the window and parted the curtain. A dark sedan sat across the street, its interior shadowed. She could feel the gaze of whoever sat inside, patient and watchful. Her heart pounded as she let the curtain fall. That night, she did not sleep. She sat awake, the flash drive in her hand, listening for every sound in the yard, every creak of the house. She thought of Michael's voice on the recording, his warning, his plea. She thought of her children upstairs, vulnerable and unaware of the full danger that might soon descend upon them. And she thought of the choice before her, to hide the truth again, bury it deeper than the tree could ever conceal it, or to finish what her husband had started and risk everything. By dawn, she was still sitting there, her eyes burning with exhaustion, but her mind clear with resolve. The tree had given her the past. Now she would have to decide what to do with the future. Would you like me to proceed directly with Chapter 3 in the same style and length, keeping the transition seamless? The dawn that crept into Anna's kitchen brought no sense of relief. She had sat through the night, her hands trembling around the flash drive as if it were a talisman and a curse all at once. Outside, the dark sedan had vanished, but its absence brought no comfort, only the certainty that those watching her were patient and would return. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, her body aching from tension, yet her thoughts were sharper than they had been in years. She could no longer pretend that silence would protect them. The files contained truths that were never meant to see the light of day, and she now understood what Michael had meant when he whispered, "If something happens to me, promise you'll take care of the children." He had trusted her not only with their lives, but with his unfinished work. When the children came down for breakfast, she forced herself to move through the motions of frying eggs, pouring juice, placing plates before them. Daniel pushed his food around with his fork, his expression hard and distant. Lily, still half asleep, looked at her mother with a mixture of curiosity and worry. Anna watched them and felt the weight of her decision press down on her chest. She could not shield them forever. The truth was here now, alive in their house, and sooner or later, it would claim them as it had claimed their father. Later that morning, Anna left the house under the pretense of errands and walked toward the bus stop. Her pulse quickened with every step, her eyes scanning the streets for signs of the car she had seen. She had not called anyone in years who might still be connected to Michael's world, yet one name pressed itself into her mind. Jonathan Reeves, an old friend and fellow journalist who had once worked alongside Michael. In the aftermath of Michael's disgrace, Reeves had turned away, choosing his own career and reputation over loyalty. She had not spoken to him since, but the files demanded a witness, someone who could help her bring them into the open. Finding him was easier than she expected. He still worked at the same newspaper, though his articles now were safe, uncontroversial pieces about cultural events and human interest stories. She telephoned first, her voice unsteady as she introduced herself. There was silence on the other end of the line, then a weary sigh. "Anna," he said, his tone both wary and apologetic. "I didn't expect to ever hear from you again." "I found something," she told him simply. "Michael left it for me. I can't explain everything on the phone. Will you meet me?" There was a pause, long enough that she thought he would refuse. Finally, he said, "I'll come. But you need to understand, Anna. If you're right about what he was working on, it's dangerous. More dangerous now than before." They agreed on a small cafe on the edge of town, a place unlikely to draw attention. Anna carried the flash drive and the pouch of stones in a bag that felt heavier than lead. When she arrived, Reeves was already there, his face lined more deeply than she remembered, his hair thinner, his eyes clouded with something like guilt. He did not reach for her hand, only gestured for her to sit. When she showed him the contents of the flash drive, his face drained of color. He scrolled through the documents, listened briefly to Michael's recorded voice, and looked up at her with disbelief. Good God, Anna. This is everything he was trying to prove. This could ruin them. He opened the pouch and let the rough gems spill into his palm, their dull shimmer catching the dim light. These stones? This is real evidence, not just words on a page. "I don't want revenge," she whispered. "I want his name cleared. I want Daniel and Lily to know their father wasn't a liar. I want the world to know the truth." Reeves hesitated, then nodded slowly. "We can publish this, but not through the paper. It's too compromised. I know people, independent journalists, international networks that still care about truth. If we can get this into their hands, it won't matter who tries to silence us." Anna felt both relief and terror. The path was opening, but with it came greater danger. She left the cafe with the files still in her possession, Reeves promising to make arrangements. As she walked home, she felt eyes on her again, the hair rising on her neck. A man across the street lingered too long at a corner. Another followed her for 2 blocks before disappearing. By the time she reached her front gate, she was shaking. That night, the danger became undeniable. The children were upstairs, the house quiet, when she heard the crunch of tires on gravel. She peered through the curtain and saw the same sedan pulling up, its headlights dimmed. 2 figures stepped out, shadows moving across the yard. Her breath caught, and she hurried to the staircase. "Daniel! Lily!" she whispered urgently. "Wake up. Quickly. Go to the back room and stay quiet." Daniel frowned, already sensing the gravity of the moment, while Lily clutched her mother's arm with wide eyes. The sound of the front gate creaking open filled the night. Anna's heart pounded in her ears. She grabbed the flash drive and shoved it into her pocket. If they came for anything, it was this. She led the children into the small back room, whispering reassurances she did not believe. The footsteps drew closer, heavy and deliberate, pausing on the porch. Then came the rattle of the doorknob, the faint scrape of tools against the lock. Anna pressed her children close, her body shaking with adrenaline. She thought of Michael, of the files he had left, of the way his voice had pleaded for her to be ready. She realized then that silence was no longer a shield, but a weapon turned against her. If she did nothing, these men would erase the last remnants of truth, and her children would grow up in the same darkness that had suffocated her for years. The door gave way with a crash, and the men entered. Anna held her breath, every nerve screaming with fear. They searched the house methodically, their voices low and tense. She could hear drawers opening, footsteps crossing the living room. Her hand clenched around the flash drive in her pocket. If they found her, if they found the children. Then, from outside, the wail of sirens pierced the night. Blue lights flickered across the windows. The men cursed, retreating as quickly as they had come. The sedan roared back to life and sped into the darkness. Anna collapsed to her knees, shaking uncontrollably, her children clinging to her. Someone had called the police, perhaps a neighbor awakened by the noise, perhaps sheer chance. Whatever the reason, it had bought them time. The following day, she met Reeves again and placed the flash drive in his hands. "Make sure it gets out," she told him. "Even if they come for me, make sure people know." He looked at her with something like respect, something she had not seen in anyone's eyes for years. "I promise." And so it happened. Within days, the files began to spread. Journalists abroad picked them up. Stories appeared in international outlets. The names of powerful men splashed across headlines. The pouch of stones, analyzed by experts, was tied to illegal mines and trafficking routes. The scandal grew too large to contain. Those who had smeared Michael's name now faced questions they could not escape. When Anna saw the first article published, her chest filled with a pain that was also a release. Michael's name was no longer a curse. It was spoken again with respect, with vindication. She wept as she showed the story to Lily, who hugged her tightly, her small voice whispering, "I knew he was good." Daniel looked too, his eyes dark with something deeper than pride. Something like relief after years of denial. The danger did not vanish overnight. Shadows still lingered at the edges of their world, reminders that powerful men rarely forgave. But Anna no longer felt like a woman trapped in silence. She had chosen, and though the cost had been heavy, the truth was free at last. One morning, weeks later, she stepped into the yard where the old poplar had once stood. The stump remained, weathered and broken, a reminder of the day she had lifted the axe and changed the course of their lives. Daniel and Lily joined her, carrying a sapling between them. Together, they planted it in the soil, their hands dirty, their laughter mingling with the spring air. It was not as grand as the old tree, but it was alive, and it would grow. Anna looked at her children and felt, for the first time in years, that the future was open. Michael's shadow was no longer a weight upon them. It was a light guiding them forward, a voice carried on the wind through the branches of a tree that would one day stand tall, not as a burden, but as a promise. If this story moved you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss the next one. Take a moment to watch the next video waiting for you. Right now, there are many more stories to discover. And don't forget to share this video with friends and family. Some stories are too important to keep to yourself.